Okay, so good morning, everyone. We'll begin our acrylic painting that we're going to be working on. And so just a couple of things before we get started on this. First of all, just want to say that the way that I'm going to walk you guys through it is not necessarily, the one way to paint. I'm sure you guys would realize that there's no one way to do it. But I simply have found that there are definitely some things that are better than others. And a lot of it simply comes from what my professors taught me and things that I had to take a hold of and then, just to improve myself in what I was doing, and then to be able to go from there. And then other things are just simply things that I've learned in teaching students as well that are definitely really helpful. So the first thing is, when I started in college, let me just change the view here a second. When I started, let me change the view once more. There we go. So when I started in college, studying art, and I was painting, and I was painting animals and nature because I'm an outdoors person, and that's the thing that I really liked. And for some reason, I had it in my mind that the best type of art always had to just simply come out of my own imagination. So I was painting landscapes out of my imagination and presenting them. And I had roommates, and I would do the painting, and my roommates would ooh and ah about my paintings. And so I thought I was doing wonderful. And then I had a critique time with my professor and showed him all of my paintings. And I was expecting a wonderful critique, and he was not impressed at all. And basically said to me, "Who do you think you are, trying to paint out of your imagination? You have not seen the land. If you're going to try and paint landscapes, you need to get out there and paint the landscape and paint what you see, not these silly things that you're imagining in your mind." So it was very harsh, and I could have probably at that point gotten all upset and decided that I'm an artist. Artists get to do what they want. No one should tell any artist what to do. And I definitely felt that, but deep inside, I had to see that there was a huge difference between his landscape paintings and my own landscape paintings. When I looked at his, I definitely felt a sense of I was in an actual place. And it was real, and I could feel myself in that place. My own paintings just simply did not do that. There was no sense of that. There was no sense of atmosphere. I simply just didn't, it looked like I don't know what I was looking at, but I did not get any sort of sense of actually being in that place. And that's, that weakened my art. Okay. And the reason simply is because my own brain had never experienced my own images, because my eyes had never seen anything like that in reality. And so I was not able to, so therefore it did not affect my senses. We really are limited to the senses, I believe, and really having a full true experience. Now, that doesn't mean we copy and we just make copies, but that's where we begin. And there has to have an element with that. We have to be able to relate to it somehow. Okay. So anyway, so this is why when I teach painting, I definitely follow his advice and I go with reference. And of course, the best thing is to get outside and really, find a place to sit and paint what you're seeing in front of you. That can be very daunting though, and that doesn't mean that that's where we have to begin. That's what we would want to work towards, but I would not suggest that as a place for beginning, because it can get so daunting and scary. It can be fun, but it's just simply, I think, really good to start with images on a piece of paper. So much easier. So And I would probably even say that it's super helpful to work from other artists' work even before photographs, because they simply help us along. And they have already gone through all the process of reducing an image to just shapes of color. And that's really where we want to begin, is simply shapes of color and color and value. So the painting we're working from here, I'm just holding it up to the one camera there, or hold it up like this in case this is what we're working with. This is by Nicholas Bott. He's a Canadian artist, and I want to make that clear. This is not my own work, and I would never take this and then try and sell this in a gallery, because that would really be claiming it's my own, and that would be plagiarism. There's definitely nothing wrong with working from other artists' work. They do it all the time. If you go to the galleries in Europe, you'll see art students there sitting there painting from the Renaissance masters. So it's a great place to begin. So, so I have my reference image here, and I have it in color, and I also in black and white. The reason why I put it in black and white, because that helps me to be able to see the value. So I can see how dark my dark areas are, how light my light areas are. And that is super important, okay? Not just color, copying colors. We don't want to copy colors. And in fact, we can vary the colors as much as we want. I'd say as long as we match our values as close as we possibly can, and as long as we match our warm colors with warm colors, cool colors with cool colors, you can do whatever you want with the rest of it, okay? So hopefully you guys all got your papers like I'd suggested. And oh yeah, if you don't have a black and white copy, and this is a really clever suggestion, this is what I would suggest. Let me pull this down here, is to grab a phone. Let me switch my view here to this one so you can actually see this. Okay. If you take your phone and go to camera, hide my thing there. Okay, so here's a camera, and set my camera on black and white mode. Then it helps us to be able to see the colors. So I think you can see that there. Okay, so that's really handy simply for this process. So I do this quite often with my own images. Instead of making a black and white photocopy, I'll just grab my camera, set it on black and white mode, and then I look at it through that way, and then I can use that to help me with make sure I'm getting my darks and my lights, and yeah, it's just really good trick to do. So, all right, but I'm not going to need to do that, and since I'm doing this for the video and for you guys, I just knew it'd be way better to just have it right here in front of me. All right. So maybe I first should just kind of go over the supplies, just to make sure you guys have everything that you need. So I'm going to take this down a second. Okay, so I have all my colors here. The paints that I'm using, I typically don't like to work with tubes, simply because I'm a little bit frugal. So I like to be able to put unused paint back, and you can never stick paint back into a tube. So I like to use these little jars here that I have, and I just fill them from some other jars here. So these are the colors. You don't need all these colors. Really, honestly, you could get away with your blues, your primary colors, and you could do this. And you'll also notice I don't have black here. However, there are a lot of different types of blues out there that, here's a light Carillion blue, and so I have ultramarine. If I just mix white to this, it will not look like this, okay? It's going to look a little bit different. This is a little bit warmer, a little bit more turquoise, so I would have to start dabbling in all my other colors, and it just takes a lot of time. That's also why I just go ahead and get orange. Because it just simply saves me time, but it's not really necessary, okay? And I don't have purple, I have a magenta. that works, purple, magenta, whatever. And just again, to save time, a very common color to have is a yellow ochre or a raw sienna or something like that. This is sort of mustardy color, but again, not necessary. I do have a green here, but I'm not going to use it simply because I like to mix my greens. And as I mentioned to you guys in the text that I sent, you don't, I suggested not having green paint. When I've worked in the classroom with my students, in fact, I don't even set out the green paint. They have to mix their own green paints, simply because, especially landscape painting, at least when we're doing landscape, because the colors of greens really will define the atmosphere that you set. And I find if students have green paint, they just go to that one. And they will only work with that one. And then maybe they'll mix some white with it or some yellow, but they're really limited. So if I put this away and I force myself to make greens from everything else here in front of me, I simply find it's a better idea. You get better results. You'll also notice I don't have black. Okay, nothing wrong with black, but I just honestly believe it kills the atmosphere once again of the painting. It just kills the sense of light. I prefer to work with warm and cool colors. So after my professor got me to stop painting out of my imagination, that's when I got onto, let me set this up here. I got onto the Impressionists, and that's where I kind of got the idea of not, I'm trying to set that there, the impression of not working with black, working really with warm and cool colors. Okay, so values in warm and cool colors. If you just those two things in your mind will just help you go so far. Okay. All right, so let's get going. The first thing we're going to want to do is get this image drawn in. It's not a must, but I would strongly encourage that you draw your shapes in first with pencil, especially when you're first learning. Okay. When I go out and sit and paint plein air, I don't usually do this. I don't take the time. I just start with paint right away. But now that I'm here and now that we're kind of backing up to a little more basics, it's a really good idea. Couple of things to keep in mind before we start drawing. Depending on the size of canvas that you got or the proportions of the shape of canvas you guys got, we're going to have to make some changes because this is fairly square, isn't it? Maybe I should fold this in half. Just to sort of get an idea. Okay, this composition is rather square, and this is definitely horizontal. So I need to come up with a way to solve that case because these proportions don't match this. So I either am going to have to add a bunch of, I'm going to have to make up a little bit, do something on the side here. I'm going to have to do something on the left, perhaps a bit on both, or I take the whole thing and stretch it out. But then, you know, that really skews it. And then my trees get wider, my mountain, the angles change. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So my thought is what I am going to do, and I'm going to let you guys kind of solve that problem on your own, however you want to do it. This mountain is quite centered, and I actually would prefer it not being quite so centered. I'd like it a little bit off to one side, and I can now choose, should I go to the left side? Should I move to the left and add more to my picture over here? Or should I move it to the right? Okay, let me explain a couple of composition reasons of how I come to that decision. My first thought is if I just add a little bit of snow and rocks to this side, that would be super simple, easy to do. I can easily just, you know, I don't have to hardly make up anything. Let me flip to this side, okay? A little bit more, just extend this blue shadow, extend the white. Maybe I could add, you know, there's a rock starting there. I could add a little bit more rock, and then I could just draw in more there. The only problem is I think we will have an issue with balance then because there's a lot more happening here. Okay, if we look at the leftover painting, this is a lot busier than this. So this feels visually heavier, okay? So this feels heavy. The mountain obviously is heavy. It's a big, bold shape. So that has some visual weight to it. And this has probably the least amount of visual weight here, okay, because it's light and it's big and there's not a lot of activity happening. So if I add to this side, that means I move all my weight to the left, and my whole piece, I believe, is going to feel, it's going to feel heavy on the left. Okay, so I am going to choose to move everything to the right. Okay, so I'm going to move my mountain a little bit to the right, add a little bit more to this side here. Okay, now this is where you as an artist get to have fun. And this is where I want to encourage you guys. Don't look at this as I'm just going to copy this. Okay, at least you don't have to put it that way. You don't have to do that. And that is not going to be that's not what we're going to call success. Okay, we're not going to call success in this painting as to whether you copied your painting, made your painting look just like Nicholas Bott. Okay, that's not what it's about. That's not, he obviously was not copying what he saw in front of him. We can see that he's done a lot of abstraction. Okay, and we're not going to do the same thing either. Or sorry, we're not going to do that either. What we are going to do is, can we capture this feeling of first of all, nice and bright, sunny. Okay, so the atmosphere, our painting should feel like it's nice and bright and sunny. And to me, the other sense I get is just grandeur. I guess that's the word I would call it. It feels fresh, it's sunny, very outdoorsy, bright, free, cheerful, spacious, and then just very grand. Okay, so that's what I think I'm going to want. And so here we go. I hope you guys will be able to see. Oh, I'm so frustrated about this dark spot here. I wish I was thinking better. Okay. If anything, with this mountain, I want to get my mountain laid in first. I want to make sure I get that in the right place. If anything, I'm going to want to, if I'm going to change in any direction, I'm going to want to make it bigger. This is my choice. I want to make it a little bit bigger, and I might want to make it a little bit steeper. Okay, that's just simply my choice. You don't have to do that. I'm going to move it over to the right, so it's not going to be so centered. I'm going to keep it nice and high. Now I'm going to draw quite dark so you guys can see. Let me move this other camera down here so you can see my drawing. Whoops. A little bit better. Get that as straight as I can. All right, here we go. Now hopefully you'll be able to see a little bit better. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to move it a little bit over to the right, and I want to get my angles nice and steep. Okay. And sometimes, by the way, it can be helpful to actually just trace over it a minute. Let your pencil move, and so you get a sense of that. There. Okay, now I got to be honest. I am not 100% sure if this big area here is clouds or part of the mountain, but I'm guessing it's clouds. I'm like 90% sure that this is a big bank of clouds here, because it looks like it continues on down here. And I just can't imagine further into distance it would be that big. So because these mountains further in distance would be, I believe, smaller. So I'm thinking this is a big bank of clouds. Okay. So here we go. So we got this is a slight angle, and I really like this one here. And this is, I believe, is super important. Don't miss that change in the angle there, because otherwise your mountain's going to look like, you know, that typical, you know, when we were little kids and we drew our mountains like this, these sort of pyramid sort of shapes. Okay. Yeah, just that's like symbolic of a mountain. There's no mountain in the world that looks like that. Okay, none. I've looked at a lot of, unless if it was, boy, it would be everywhere. It would be so famous to have a mountain that looks actually like this. There are certainly steeper peaked mountains, but nothing like that. So I definitely want this in there, that shape. Okay, so I start with this big, bold shape. What else? I want to get my main shapes established. So I'm going to start with that. Notice I'm not putting in any details yet. Okay, I want to get this hillside established. I want to get that. That's a very big, bold shape. I want to get that laid in place. First of all, I want to make sure it's not coming up as high as my mountain. It comes quite high on the left-hand side, comes very high up here. And I want that because I want that to feel steep, but I don't want it to take over my mountain. So I want to make sure I stay below my mountain. And I'm just going to block that in just with a big line coming down. Not too perfect. Okay. But anyways, that's where that's going to fall. Okay. So I have that. I want to make sure I get my horizon nice and low here for my water. It's not my horizon, but the water line. Let me extend this a little bit further. I like the sand showing, the sand before the water. So that's got to get a little bit longer. So I'm going to lay that in basically there. And now I'm going to get my water line. Make sure you get that. It's a little bit on an angle, but it has to be very close to horizontal. We are so tempted to draw our lakes like this all the time. So often I have students draw a picture. Here's some mountains in the background and there's some trees. And when reality, when it looks like this, and there's the surface of the lake, you know, so we have something like this. So often students will tend to do this. And then they draw the lake like that, okay? Because their brain is telling them that lake's curved. You'll see immediately by curving that lake, it has changed the view and it makes it look like we are now way up in the sky looking down on this lake, okay? Compared to this one. Here we're really low, and just by one simple curve, you've changed everything. Okay, so we don't want to do that. I don't think in this picture, at least I don't. I definitely don't want that to happen. I don't want to feel like I'm way up in the sky. I want this because then my mountain's not going to feel big. I want this sense of grandeur. So I want my mountain to feel nice and big. All right. This here, oh, by the way, rule of thirds is a good thing to note, right? Your rule of thirds. So if I take this and just loosely, so rule of thirds is when we divide our picture, I'm just going to put that lightly, into 3 sections roughly. If you have a digital camera, you'll notice that you can do that with your camera, make it appear lines like that. That's called the rule of thirds. This simply gives us a guide to help us avoid sticking our emphasis in the center of our picture. We want to stay closer to these cross points for the important parts and also for any of our major horizontal lines. Okay, obviously we don't have to, but but it's good. So it is no mistake, or it's not coincidence that the artist would have had this line up right around that line there. Okay, this one doesn't. Okay, so you don't always have to. Okay, our mountain falls really close, or his mountain falls really close to this line here. Okay, the majority of it is in the center area, but the peak, the real major part, which is this, is really close to the third area. Okay, also our tree that stands out the most is over here as well. Our big bold rock is close to this area, so that's not coincidental. I am guessing he would have done that on purpose, or he just simply has such a strong understanding. It's so natural, it will just naturally happen to him, with him. And that's in most cases, after doing art for so many years, you do that. Okay, so let's make sure we get that established. Our other shape of these mountains right here, that's about at the third. Okay, see, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's where that's going to go. And about on my other third is where I'm going to put my tall tree, my tallest one. Oops, you can't see what I'm doing here. My tallest tree is right here. I'm only going to just draw it in as a triangle right now. All right. And then there's another sort of zigzaggy sort of shape. And that carries down. These are my other trees. And I'm not worrying about getting them exact. Okay, we don't need to. I've got a few more trees up here to echo it. Okay, I want them smaller, at least. And what I'm really doing, I'm not doing any details in my trees yet, not necessary, but I do want these tall, pointy shapes. That is important. Okay, so that's why I'm drawing those in, because that's the feel of these trees, and they add to that sense of grandeur, these tall, pointy sort of trees. In my mind, I think that's playing a big part of it, as opposed to some sort of squat type tree. Okay, our big rugged rocks, we've got a big one right here, very important one that comes in front. And it continues down all the way to the bottom of our canvas, the edge. By the way, what happens at the edges is really important. Never ignore the edges. Where things leave the canvas really makes a difference. So this is all I'm going to do. Okay, I don't have to get this exact, but it should feel, pointy, jagged. So I got some sharp edges here. Keep everything, look at every shape here is on that diagonal. Don't let those flatten out, okay? Then we're gonna lose that sense of that real slope. We wanna keep that slopey feel, okay? So here's my one big rock. I like this rock right in the corner here, so I'm gonna put that one in. Okay, again, let's keep that rough shape, keep it simple. Where is this one in relation? This is close to this point here, so I want to make sure I get that somewhere around there. Okay, so notice what I'm doing here. I'm using almost all straight lines because I don't want my rocks to feel smooth and round. So I'm purposely using straight lines here. Well, it sounds like we're either having people join us or people leaving, I'm not sure. That's fine. Okay, so I've got 3 big rocks, and make sure you get them all different sizes and shapes. Okay, don't make it feel like these polka dots. We don't want polka dots on the hill. And then I've got another one up here, draws our eye up the hill. Okay, if you've ever done any sort of hiking up in the mountains and you get up on these slopes, you definitely know there's something about, at least to me, I just have a lot of memories of hikes where you go off the path and you go venture up this slope, this big grassy slope. And for me, that's always one of the funnest things about camping. Okay. And these rocks just lean like that. And so to me, that's doing it. That's helping. And then these patches of green. So I want to get at least one more rock. Okay, so don't worry if you get every single rock. If that's helpful to you, if you're like, I just want to stay as close as possible, I don't want to have to make up anything out of my mind, then definitely go for it, okay? Place every rock. What I simply want to make very clear to you, though, is that you don't start beating yourself up before you've even begun. You know, we can do that. It's so easy to do that. We set some sort of expectation we give ourselves some sort of thing that we have to do that's really difficult, and it's just not necessary. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say is getting those shapes exactly, is not that necessary. Okay, once again, you'll notice I'm not putting in details. We don't need details right now. Okay, you should never start a painting with details. Just like when you build a house, you don't start with the windows and the doors. That would be a disaster, right? Because you don't know where to put them yet. You'll end up putting them in the wrong place. You start with the foundation, then you build the framework, and then everything gets added to that. Drawing and painting is just the same way. Okay, we're also creating. All right. So I think it'll be helpful to draw in these shapes of green, okay, to place them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Again, I'm drawing very dark so that you guys can see it. I see this line joins up to that one. I see I brought my one rock down. That's fine. So I'm just going to carry that shape on past it. And then here's another green shape coming down. Remember, keep those long and skinny. So that's what we want to notice. These are long, skinny, diagonal shapes. And everyone is a different size, and everyone is a different shape. And so we want to keep that. They need to feel the same. If they don't look the same, that's not a big deal, but they should have this similar feel to it. Yeah, because I see my shapes are definitely not in the same place. Oops, let me hold that at the right angle. Bring that to the camera. Okay, but hopefully, now if I put this right beside it, hopefully you guys can get a sense of how they still have that same rhythm. I think that's the word I'll use. Okay, things have the same rhythm. Okay, feels bumpy. I always try to think of adjectives, descriptive words. Look at this and think of descriptive words of how it feels. Okay, and then I look at this and do I have those same words come to my mind? Okay, again, you know, this feels rugged, steep, yeah, kind of lumpy and bumpy. I sort of, you know, imagine that when I'm stepping on that, as I'm climbing that hill, heading up this way, I have to really watch where I step so I don't twist an ankle. Okay, and that's what I want this to feel that same way. Okay, all right. Now we need to move into this area here. Okay, to get some of these shapes. Take a look at this. This is wonderful. This is why it's so helpful to start working from another artist. This, I can guarantee you, he has simplified so much. That's not what the shape, if we took a photograph, it would not be doing that. Okay, he has left out so many details and he has simplified this down, and it's absolutely wonderful that he's done that for us. And it just simply, even just as a viewer, even if we weren't trying to paint this, we're just enjoying it hanging on our wall. It's just, it helps our mind get to what really matters in our emotion, I guess, imagining whatever it is that responds and then feels. Okay, and notice these are straight lines, just straight lines, in one kind of curved line, but really I can see as 1, 2, 3, that's actually even 4 straight lines that kind of curve around. But all these straight lines are helping to keep that sense of that steep, sharp, jagged. Okay, they're not soft and round and flowy and curvy, because that doesn't say rock. Okay, and this needs to feel like rock and rugged, and so sharp, pointy lines do that. Okay, remember the difference between when I compared a circle and a square, and how we had a different emotion for them. Okay, you know, this has to feel, you know, all those straight lines make it feel just a little bit more dangerous. Okay, a little bit more grand, a little bit more wild, as opposed to if they were soft and round. So I want to stick with those sort of shapes, straight. So I'm going to just use straight lines here. Okay, notice these two lines are not parallel. Very important. If I grab two of my paint brushes, little tiny things like this. Hopefully I can make this clear to you guys, because it seems so small and unimportant. This line here, I'm going to put my ruler along that one, or my paintbrush, and then this line here. See, those lines are not parallel. Okay, when we first glance at it, it may feel like it is, or we may not pay attention to the fact that it's not, and we very accidentally could make those two parallel, and that's going to change the feel. Okay, because that's going to reduce the triangle feel. And if I take a look at my own, look at this. I did not do such a good job. Okay, so I need to increase this angle here. I need to get those to point together, because that's going to help. I don't want to lose that mountainy sort of feel, that, you know, that triangle sort of feel. It's not a triangle, but it still has to feel triangular. Okay, and now let's get this one established. I'm going to use a series of straight lines again, and that comes down. How much lower than this one? Here's a straight line. That's pretty much about the same. So maybe mine's coming a little too far down, but I think it's okay. I don't mind that. I'm going to have those a little more separate. And then there's another line. And then this jagged sort of line comes down here and then joins with the trees. Okay. Now I can see something that has happened here. My line on his painting, these lines are fairly close to this, to the third. Mine, how are mine? Well, maybe they're not so bad. I was feeling that I had drawn these lines too low on my page, but I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. All right. Let's finish this detail here. I'm going to keep his straight line feel. I'm going to just do the same thing he did there, because I like how it works and I don't want to lose that. Okay. Mine's a little bit wider, so let's narrow that down. And then we got this line here. Highlights and shadows. The edges of your highlights and shadows, very important. That helps create the form, the 3D feel of the painting. So come down here, this, that shadow area comes across there. Okay. Let's finish this out. So that comes, let's get that angle, if anything, a little bit steeper. Once again, those lines should not be parallel. They're really close, aren't they? But they're still not parallel. And once again, I did it again. I got mine parallel, so I'm going to slope that one a little bit more. Okay. And then let's get this shape in here. So there's two little peaks there. May as well stay with two peaks, but if you ended up drawing three for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to change the feel of your painting, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Okay, this should be a pointy shape, very important. Should feel that pointiness. My back trees, I've ended up drawing them a little taller, these two. And so they're now crossing that line. Okay, his are quite a bit below. That's not going to change the feel at all. That's not going to affect anything. And I kind of, just looking at my own, I'm just going to keep mine. Mine are going to be a little bit taller. So again, reduce this down to the shape it is, a pointy triangle. Okay, this looks kind of like a boomerang shape. So that white shape is just a long, skinny, pointy triangle. That brownish, orangish sort of shape also, okay. These are like triangles, triangle, triangle, sort of boomerang or two triangles put together, another sort of triangle. Everything should feel triangle-ish, okay? Like a bunch of puzzle piece triangles all put together. One's a little bit taller than the other. Let's keep that. Let's keep that variety. In fact, I even increased that in mine. I even exaggerated that. Okay, so that's fine. So you'll notice, by the way, please don't be trying to draw in any of this detailed texture, okay? That's going to just get you all messed up right now. Okay, we don't need to worry about that. That will happen in our brushstroke, okay? In our brushstrokes and in our layering, that will happen when we layer our colors. Okay, these shadows, very important. Okay. Oh, these rocks. Let's get these rock shapes. There's 4 there. Notice each one is a slightly different size. Important, smaller, bigger. And we may as well, try to repeat these shapes as much as possible. But what really matters again is the angles. Okay. Because we want this big glacier. It looks like it'd be a glaciery bit area. This big glacier, we want that to feel sloped, okay? That's, sloping back away from us. It's sloping up to the left here, but also sloping away from us. So having those angles are important. So this one, these are a little bit smoother, you'll notice. They feel a little bit smoother, so let's keep that on an angle. Keep that on an angle. We want to, as much as possible, avoid too many horizontal and vertical lines. Vertical lines will tend to ruin the perspective, and horizontal lines will ruin the three-dimensionality of it and the slope. Okay, so all of it just makes it flat is what I'm really trying to say. There's that shape and that shape. This is the beauty of, learning with landscapes as opposed to, let's say, human faces. We can change all sorts of things and it won't look distorted. Whereas if you're painting a human face, like you just can't. You can't just go move the nose or move the one eye up unless you're going for a Picasso sort of thing, right? But you will, distortion just stands out very quickly in the human face, so quickly. And it just doesn't in something like a landscape, or drawing, even drawing an animal. So that's why landscapes are so good, such good places for learning all of this. It's so forgiving, and we need a lot of forgiveness always. As humans, we really survive on forgiveness, don't we? It's the only way we can keep going in life, I believe, is knowing we're forgiven. Otherwise, we just carry too much. And it's painting, once again. Art is life. Life is art. All right. Before I begin to wax philosophic, let's get back to our painting here. Last thing is these shadows here. Okay. Slopey. Okay. Let me just really want to point out how these shapes feel so different than this, because snow is laid down very differently than rock. Rock is harsh and rugged, and it's just jagged, and it's not graceful and smooth and flowy. Snow is graceful, smooth, and flowy. So we need shapes that feel graceful, smooth, and flowy. Like, look at this thing, a beautiful curve, a little wisp of a point there. Okay. Look at that. Look at that lovely oval end on there. Okay. Look at this. Beautiful. And that's what tells us that's snow. So that feels like snow. So we want to have that. Again, watch your shapes that they're not going horizontal. I already started drawing mine too horizontal at the beginning. Keep it on an angle, not too much. And let's get this one. I love this little curve there, so I'm going to repeat that. Whoosh. Sound effects are fantastic, by the way, when drawing and painting. Love that. I'm going to exaggerate that curve just a little bit because I love that sort of shape. So soft edges. So when we paint that, we're going to want to somehow soften those edges there a little bit, I think. Not too much. And whoa, heading up that hill with that. Okay, see, this flows right into that one because it's a shadow. So we got this, and this comes down there. Don't let those go parallel. Don't let those two lines go parallel. Okay. Oh, this black thing is terrible. This is so unprofessional of me. I shouldn't work this way, but there is, I suppose, look at it this way. There is, I just want to show you that you can, you don't have to have everything perfect. You don't have to have the perfect materials. You don't have to have the expensive stuff. It's not where it comes from. Okay. It's just because I'm using this for teaching. That was a really bad teacher move on my part to use this one. I thought I'd be able to cover it more with my red paint. Okay. I've yet to explain to you guys why in the world I suggested to you to paint the ground, to paint this red orange color over top of it first. Okay, so there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording here for a minute, and then I'm just going to check in with you guys and see where everyone's at, because I don't want to start painting until we're ready. Okay, so let's pause here a second. Okay, so we are ready to paint. A couple of things you do want to be prepared for. I forgot to show. So I'll quickly show here is, okay, obviously brushes. So I have a mess of brushes here, way more than I'm going to use, and I don't need all of these. Okay, but just a nice variety of sizes is really all we want to go for. Okay, and since we're working with acrylic, we want something that is stiff bristled, not big and fluffy like, where's my watercolor brushes? Let me show you the difference. Okay, like this is a watercolor brush, very soft. Okay, and yeah, it holds a lot of water. This would be terrible to try and paint with, something that soft. Okay, so we have synthetic brushes and we have natural hair brushes, and you probably, maybe you can see it on the video. So that's a natural hair and that's a synthetic hair. It just looks more plasticky, but both of them are still stiff. Okay, and that's what we need simply because acrylic paint is stiffer than watercolor, obviously. So put my watercolor brush away. And then there's all different sorts of sizes called flats and filberts and rounds and yeah, you just, because you paint a variety of shapes and sizes, and so it's good to have a variety. All right, and just, but you definitely don't need that many. Okay, I'm just boring from palette. You definitely want a nice big surface for painting on, or for mixing your paints on. Okay, and a little advice is don't spend money on something expensive. It's just not necessary. This is simply, well, it's called parchment paper. I usually use wax paper because it's super cheap. And this is my palette, which came with my field easel, and I don't like to ruin my palette. So I always just put this down and do all my mixing on here. And when I'm done, I wrinkle it up and throw it away. Okay. Those flat styrofoam trays are awesome. They're cheap and they work great. I would always suggest that you start with a new one though, so that you're mixing on a nice white surface. Definitely have water. If you guys don't have water yet, get some. Look at this, look how much water I got. I got a whole bucket full here, okay? You need to be able to clean those brushes good in between colors, and you definitely don't want to ruin them, okay? Because I have containers, I have my palette knives, okay? We're not going to do any painting with palette knives. These are just cheapo things again. I just use it for scooping the paint out, and sometimes I'll use them for mixing, but on my palette. But usually I just use my my brush. So, okay, let's get this set back up again. And hopefully this is close enough. All right. All right, where do we begin? It's always the question someone always asks, where do we begin? It does not matter too much, really, except I would suggest we begin with the main part. Start with your emphasis, get that established, and then you can work from there, okay? I'm gonna show you layering. If you look very carefully at this painting, you can see there's a lot of things have this dark outline around them. Now that's a bit of a style choice. There's nothing here, there's no dark outline here. But it's a bit of the artist's style, and now let's sort of explain what it does. For one thing, it really helps to draw the eye. Notice the thickest line is on the emphasis, on the mountain, on this side here, okay? It's not everywhere. Notice the thickness in that line changes, okay? It's not always the same thickness everywhere, but here on the shadows, there is no black line, okay? Because that's not a solid shape. So putting in this black line just sort of gives this sense of really solid, like a solid edge. So we see it's boldest on the rocks, okay? He's using it on purpose. In the distance, it disappears a lot. So it's a lot thinner, it doesn't stand out as bold, okay? The way he doesn't actually, I don't believe he takes a paintbrush and goes around afterwards painting these in. It comes out naturally because what we do is we start with the dark color and we build on top of that with lighter colors. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to start putting down our dark colors into these shapes here. Okay, and then we are going to, and then those dry, and then we layer our lighter colors, our medium colors, and then we finish off with our brighter highlights. All right, so that's what we're going to do, is we're going to get those sort of established. Think of complementary colors. They can really set each other off nicely, okay? So just because this mountain looks brown, we don't necessarily, or kind of this brownish orange, we don't necessarily start that off as our first color to put down, okay? A really nice idea is to actually start off with a complementary to that, okay? However, sometimes we might think that we really want to establish the deep, deep shadowy feel to the color, like in the trees here, okay? or we want these bold lines. So we might start these off with really deep dark colors as well. All right. Now that brings me to the explanation of why we started with orange. When you paint, because you're working with these bristles and you're working on a textured surface, typically, you always end up with these teeny tiny little dots that will show through and they will peek through. And if those dots are white, then they will, they bring this pale, a pallor, is that the right word? They just make it feel sort of pale. And as an opposite to a bright, bold color like this, peeking through here and there, makes it feel more vibrant. Okay, so much more dramatic here. All right, so I'm going to actually start with the mountain here. So Teresa, you said you start with the sky, but this is why I was suggesting not to go charging too far ahead. I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world, but actually I want to get this mountain established because that's the shape I really want to establish here. And I might actually create that shape even more dramatically later by painting around it. Painting negative space around our colors and bringing shape to it by bringing negative space can add a lot of life to the piece here. I want to start with a darker, cooler color to set off these really nice warm highlights. So I'm going to create a purple is what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to pull out some of my magenta here. Let's figure out about how much I need. Put back my excess colors. And we're going to get that laid in first. Yeah, look at this. We're already over an hour into here. I'm going to use this cool color, blue. It's like a phthalo blue. To create my purplish color. Definitely don't need too much. Well, I can keep it in there because then I'm probably going to get those rocks and trees in as well. Okay. Acrylic dries quickly, by the way, so you don't want to leave brushes and things sitting out. I should probably put my palette knives in the water. And I'm guessing I'm going to probably need some white in there because I think that's going to be too dark. So ooh, my white's pretty thin and sloppy here and gooey. Hope this is going to work okay. Not sure what's up with this white. Oh well, we're going to prove that we can never use poor materials as an excuse. Okay, so here's my palette. Let's get my brush that I'm going to choose for this. Well, maybe actually I'm going to mix this up with one of my palette knives here. Which color do I start with? These typically you start with your lighter color, pull the darker one into it, okay, as opposed to the other way. The reason is because you need a lot less of the darker one than you do of the lighter one. These two are pretty much exactly the same in value. I'm not going to start with white though because my color on one is fairly dark. So I'm just going to grab some of this magenta first. Pull in some of my blue and start mixing this. And that's really, that's like going black. Okay. So that's what I figured. I don't want black. So that's why I knew I'd be needing some blue. I can't even tell what that is. I can't tell if that's leaning to the red side or the blue side because it's so black. So I'm going to pull in a little bit of my white. I don't want to waste all my white. So I just grab it from the corner here. Some glob. See how this is going to go. There we go. So right away we can see, okay, that's really definitely purple there. But this, it's still pretty dark. The camera's not showing it as light as I'm actually seeing it. Okay, so it's definitely a lot lighter there. Get that mixed pretty good. And I like this. This is nice and cool. I think this will set off nicely against that orange later on. And let's go ahead. I'm going to choose a fairly small brush because I'm working a fairly small area. Get that excess off of there. And I'm only going to be focusing now on these areas here, okay? And I'm going to paint that whole shape in. I'm not going to do the snowy areas. And try not to fuss. That's all I can say is try not to get that stroke down. Don't be scrubby about it. Try to be confident and bold. And you'll see already some of this, if I can, well, maybe you can't see on the camera. I can already see it here, but you might see on your own little tiny dots of red already showing through. And if it's white, then there's this temptation that I have to keep scrubbing at it to make that go away. And that just will kill your painting. So this is going to feel a little backwards because this is laying in a highlighted area. Okay, so I'm not going to worry too much about, you know, little fuzzy edges because I've got that red showing. Okay. Again, you could watch another video, or you may have been in a painting class and they are working completely differently. They're not doing this at all. Okay. This is simply, you know, how I've sort of developed my own way from watching others, picking it up, finding out what works for me. But I do really like this idea of layering. I like to.
You're just starting with the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not just the mountain. Yeah. So right now I'm just doing the brown areas of my mountain here.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. But what you're gonna notice is I'm gonna be painting by color, not by object. So we're not gonna finish the mountain and then move on to the next thing. Okay. That's not how we're gonna do it. We're gonna be looking for everything that has that that color, and I'm going to look to spread that color around. Okay, now like I said, we don't want to fuss and don't worry about staying in the lines. Okay, but don't go to the other extreme where you completely lose your shape. Okay, that shape matters. Okay, but it's just not about staying in the lines, but those lines should be guiding you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do these ones back here. And I'm not going to do those there. Now I want to repeat this color somewhat. I want to get this out, not just in one area. Unity, keeping your painting unified really matters. So unified means all the different areas have to get along, okay? It's like, you know, they're dancing, they're each doing their own sort of dance, but there's only one song playing, if you think about that, you know, at a dance party. You know, you've only got one song playing, but everyone's dancing in their own way. But their dancing should relate to each other because they're, you know, so the rhythm, some things will end up looking similar. So we should have similarities. And one simple way to do that is similarities in color. Okay. So I'm going to repeat that color. I'm going to bring it in over here into these rocks. And let's do all of them. Down here as well. See, a little bit of white paint is showing up here. That's okay. Let's get this rock established, shape. Okay, and I don't want this blue color only on the right. Okay. Now this is why, see what's happening here. See what's happening. I don't know if you can see this. See how this is going really fuzzy edge, okay? And I can fuss, and I don't want that. That's a rock. That's not supposed to feel fuzzy. It's supposed to feel nice and solid. So I could go back in there a little bit more, just get that edge a little more solid, but it just keeps staying fuzzy on this side. I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to be able to establish that later by painting my snow over top of that edge, and I'll be able to define my edges. That's also why I actually don't start with my sky. I like to really shape and define the shape of my mountain by when I lay in the sky. Okay. All right, I've got all this purple on the right, but it's really only on this side here. So I'm going to bring it in. Let's balance this out, keep this unity, keep the right side of my painting unified with the left. So let's get this down over here. And I see I'm starting to run out of paint. So that's why right away I'm going to get this established. So I'm going to get that one in there right away. So I've got this this purple, which is going to show up. It's going to appear here and there. It's right away nicely balancing with that side there. But let's get a few more of these in. A few more rocks. Here's another one. This one back here. And if you're like me, some of these dark shapes are just going to keep nagging at you. Like these dark shapes are because I'm thinking about my painting and I'm like, but they're not dark. This isn't dark. That's light and bright and sunny. And they're just so dark right now. And I'm sure there's got to be some of you guys that are not liking that. Like, I don't like that. And neither do I. But I have to discipline myself to stick with this, to trust it, to trust what's happening. And just, you know, we'll get there. I've had so many students that do this thing where they're like, it doesn't look like it. The final piece, you know, they're like this and they're like, that doesn't look like that. And then they paint over the whole thing. And it's like, no, I know it doesn't look like that, but we'll get there. You know, it's like driving from one, you know, if you're going to go drive to some city and you only get halfway there and then you're like, this doesn't look like the city I was going to. And then you turn around and head back again because it didn't look like it. And I'm, you know, I have to tell students, no, you just simply weren't there yet. Right? You would never do that in your car. You would never turn around. You'd keep going until you get there and then it looks right. So try to think that way in your painting. Just keep moving forward. Picking up some white here. So I'm running out of paint. That's all right. My paint's really sticky here. By the way, having a little squirt bottle, which I should have, helps keep your paint somewhat wet, but you don't want to water it down too much, of course. I'm working with really old, poor paint, which is not making this easy. So my paint is so dry in my brush, that's why it's not going down so well, okay? So no sense of light yet, but I'm going to get there. But do I have a sense of the slope and the ruggedness? Is that happening? And that with my shapes, my dark, bold shapes, and I think they are. Okay, I think that is definitely starting to happen here. They're not all exactly the same. So I've done just my rocks and my main mountain shapes. And I see I have some rocks up here as well. So if your paint is not flowing well enough and you need it to flow a little bit more, you can add a little bit of water to it. Don't water it down too much. Don't turn it into a watercolor. I'm gonna dip my brush in. I want to define this edge just a little bit more. Okay, there. So you can see, yeah, that does help a little bit. But I like this. Here, just a second. Let me define some of these edges. So all I'm doing is I'm dipping my brush just in the water and then, getting a little bit more. So now my, and I just put the stroke down, lay it in there with confidence. Oof, put it down, leave it. I really need to get this one. I'm losing my slope there. So just a little bit of thinning that paint down just a wee little bit is helped get my shape back and get rid of those fuzzy, blurry edges. All right. Okay. How we doing?
I gotta do more rocks, but okay.
Okay. We're going to keep doing the same thing. I'm going to move on to, well, I think I want to get this area laid in, separated, okay? I want to get that shape established. And that's in the background, so I want that to feel a little more blue, a little cooler. So I'm going to add, let me show so you can see my palette. I'm going to pull in a little more blue. I'm going to keep working with this same color. I'm not starting all over with a brand new color because this, again, helps keep the unity of that. Pull in a little bit more white. Okay, so now I've got a different blue and it's going to be a little bit lighter here. Yeah, I definitely want that lighter. Okay, so I'm going to get that quite a bit lighter. But that's my dark main color for back here. I'm painting around my snow. I'm painting, I can paint right over these trees if I want, and then just paint them afterwards, but this just helps me to remember where everything is. I really like this blue. This is not an ultramarine blue, by the way, so you're gonna have it, if you're using ultramarine, it's gonna feel a little bit different, but that's fine. Really, as long as just, you watch your values and warm and cool. So I'll just keep saying that over and over again, okay? Where else can I put this? I want to get this established, so I'm going to get that in here. I'm going to use the same blue because it gives me an opportunity to repeat it, that same color, to have it repeated now on the opposite side. of my painting. Okay, that again helps with some balance and unity. Little speckles of red showing through my paint. That's fine. There's my blue water. It's weird. I'm hearing my own voice coming over someone's speaker there. I'm going to lighten this up some more, and notice in my in here, I've got, you know, the lighter areas and the darker areas. So I want to get that established again. That got lost, right? Like we can't see that anymore, and I don't like that. So I do want to get that established. So I'm going to put this lighter cool blue. Do I want to go with the blue? Let's lay that in there. Yeah, I think that's okay. I'm going to get this lighter blue now painted over top, just in the areas where the sun is hitting on these slopes. Okay, again, try not to fuss. That's just, I'll just keep saying that. Just really avoid fussing with your painting. Try to lay that, you know, stroke down and leave it alone. Try and get that bold to feel, or that stroke to feel bold and not stuttery. And now on this one, it's going to be exciting to put the, oh, yeah, as soon as when we put the highlights in. The direction of your brush stroke, by the way, is very important. So that's why, especially, you know, you don't want, you know, if you can just put the stroke down and leave it alone, single strokes. It just keeps so much more life into your piece. So the direction of those brush strokes, I'm not sure. Someone out there has their isn't muted, and I keep hearing my voice. It's freaking me out. So funny. And let's go ahead and repeat it on these rocks. So we have these lighter areas on the rocks. So you'll note, let your brush stroke show. Nothing wrong with your brush stroke showing. I should probably switch. I think I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here, by the way. I want a smaller stroke here. So I'm going to switch to a smaller one for these smaller rocks areas. So don't leave your paintbrush sitting around too long. I can leave it here for a little bit, but not for too long, because that paint will dry and you will ruin your brushes. Yeah, I like this brush better. Bristles are just a little bit stiffer, and I just really feel I can just lay the brush stroke down and leave it alone. Place it there and leave it. And let some of, notice I'm letting some of the darker color show through. Let's get the glare off of there. Okay. So letting that color show through. Let's do the same with our rocks down here. Okay, so sort of following these areas where the lighter side is. Again, if you can put single strokes down, you will do a much better, you'll have a better chance of retaining the shapes. As opposed to blending colors together. That's why I chose this particular artist, because he doesn't hardly blend at all. He just lets each, he changes the color, and he just really retains the shape. And that just helps with so much. So that's what I'm doing. I'm putting down single strokes of color going in the right direction, the direction that establishes the slope. So, but notice my subtle change. This is very subtle difference here. It's a little more obvious there than it is here. So I can bring a little bit more white into this.
Hey, Rick, what is the light blue for?
The light blue is starting to establish the highlight, the lighter areas, right? Because there's lighter and darker areas on our slopes, like here in the shapes we make. See, this is lighter and this is darker. Okay, so we're separating those now. We want to separate our highlights from our shadows. This is the big, we painted this big rock shape. Now we're starting to separate this from this. Okay.
Okay.
So where you put these light areas really matters. Okay, like where's in like our light source on this painting, obviously the sun is, we can't see it in the painting, but it's obviously somewhere over here on the right hand side, because this side that's picking up the sun. Okay, so we need to make sure we get that established in all of our shapes, that the right and side and the upper side of each shape is the lighter side. Okay. You know, you might have one here, here's one where it's a little more solid just because of the angle of it, but typically, you know, this one's really obvious. This is quite obvious, a little less obvious. This one's obvious, a little less obvious, but still.
Okay, I think I get it.
Okay, so that's what we're doing right now. We're separating our, remember, value matters the most. This is where I should be actually looking at this as well, okay? To be able to see the dark areas and the light areas of our shapes, okay? But everything starts to blend here. It almost gets a little harder to tell what's rock and what's grass. So that's where this is helpful as well. But it's nice to have this to refer to. Am I on, you know, am I on the right track?
Okay. Did you make the light blue or did you have it?
This, no, this, I just simply put this same dark purplish blue that I had, and all I did, Katie, was add a little bit of white to it. So that's all I'm doing. I just keep pulling a little bit of my white, and I'm only lightening that same color.
Oh, okay.
I did not, yeah, no, I have definitely not used this blue here. I've not touched this one, okay? Not necessary, and that would feel very different. That's, you know, that's quite different than this.
True. Okay, I need to make that then.
Yeah, and don't, you know, if you still have some of your other dark color you made, use that same color and just add
White.
Yep, just add a bit of white, not too much. You can always add a little more, add a little bit at a time. If that's a bit much there. Ooh, that's a big solid glob of white. Okay. So it's getting a little bit lighter here, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm just, again, I'm not scrubbing, I'm not fussing. I'm just lay the stroke down. And even I can put some lighter. And once again, notice I'm letting the color underneath show through. I'm not totally covering it up completely. Very important. Let the colors underneath show through. And all we're doing is just laying in some of this blue, which later is going to change. It's going to really set off that the warm. And we're also separating, again, our lights and darks. So we're also really getting our values established here. Okay. I don't want to go completely as light as the final piece that, you know, the final details. We'll put in our brightest highlights later at the end. So don't jump into that too quick. Okay. Oh wow, I forgot a couple of
So
rocks.
this light blue is still the mountain. We're still working on the mountain, right?
Mountains and rocks. See mine? Do you see mine?
Okay, not the snow.
No, I've not touched the snow yet because the snow is very highlighted. Okay.
Okay. I believe I get it. Maybe.
Do you see mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just realized that these rocks here, I don't know how I did that, but very important that I get that back to feel like the other rocks. So let's see if I can do that. There we go. It might feel slightly different, but that's okay. All right. There we go. By painting all of this blue, Katie, is that your thing that keeps echoing? I think.
Sorry.
It's okay. This gets really hard for me to talk when I hear my voice echoing back to me. Distracts me. By getting all of this blue into these highlighted areas, what that is going to do? It's going to help keep our the bright, warm, sunshiny areas unified with the cooler, shadowy areas. Okay, so we want to have, you know, some, again, that repetition of that color. I got another rock, couple of rocks up here I've not established yet. Notice again, my brush strokes are leaning over just like the rocks are doing. I'm not painting details. If I can just, I don't know, I'm guessing there's, I can't see what you guys are doing, but just in case, someone out there is still trying to get those, is working at those details anyway, because it just looks better. As soon as you put a detail down, it starts to look better and feel better, and it just like makes you a little more, whew, okay, my painting doesn't look so bad. I've had so many students do that, but in the end, it just doesn't work all the way to the very end. And in the end, it starts to fall apart because they don't have the foundation shapes laid in there yet. And that's just really important. Yeah, it's like if you don't get that foundation in there, it's going to get funny at the end. It's going to feel this distortion, or it's going to lose the sense of light. It will lose the sense of three-dimensionality, all those sort of things. Okay. All right. This is enough for our rocks for now. I think the other thing that I really want to get established is my dark trees. Okay, I want to get those shapes established in there now. Okay, Again, painting with acrylic and oil, we typically start dark and work light, okay? So that's why I'm getting all my dark shapes established. Like I'm not painting that snow, like Katie asked, are we doing the snow yet? That's lighter, it'll come, we'll get there. And it's so tempting to get that snow in there right away. Because it just, we put it down like, yay, I can tell that's snow. But we don't want to do that yet. I want to get a little bit more color in my water here a second. So let's just do that quick a minute. That's quite a different blue. That's what got that more turquoise. So we'll get there, but oops, that's too late. So I'm going to bring in my phthalo blue. There, that's better. Okay, so this has a little more of that turquoisey sort of feel in there. All right, painting water. I typically want to go with horizontal strokes. Simply because water lays horizontally. Okay, so that's all I'm doing. Very subtle. Very subtle. Subtlety is so important. So important. Okay. Yeah, so let's now go ahead and let's get our base colors established for our trees. Our nice, dark, shadowy tree areas is green. And then we'll probably carry some of that into these other areas as well. All right. Since I've got this blue here, I've got a whole bunch of blue. I can try and see how I do by just adding a little bit of yellow to my blue, and let's see what sort of green we're going to get out of that. Yellow, by the way, is always going to be a very transparent color, or translucent, I should say. Just thin. So it sometimes takes a fair amount of it, but I don't want to start off with too much. Okay. Oh, rag or paper towel is always good to have. Let's get this yellow off my palette knife here. Okay. I am going to take my blue here, the same blue I've been using. Let's pull it over here into my yellow. Yeah, I don't want to run out. I think that's too much yellow. As soon as I start mixing it, I can tell it's too much, I think. Oh, maybe not. We'll see. Okay, so this has a real kind of this bright, yeah, it's a bit too much of that yellow in there. I'm not real happy with this green that I've just created. I want something duller. That just feels a little unnatural, I think. Although it's hard to tell on here. It's going to look different for sure. Your colors look different depending on what colors around it. Wow, it looks so different on the camera than in real life. Okay, it looks better on the camera than what it really is. But I'm gonna get some of my red here, my magenta. I mean, it's kind of like an alizarin crimson sort of color, this magenta. But is that working? Not really, no. So let's see just how does this look on my paintings. I'm going to want a small brush. So I can really retain these shapes. And let's just take a look. Is this too green? Yeah. Oh yeah, way too bright green. Look at that. Okay, that's way too bright. Okay, now, because I want this dark, that's what I need, is that dark. So that's too bad. It's too bad I mixed up so much green and it's just way too dark or way too bright. So I need to dull it down And the way we dull down green is to use its complementary, which is going to be a red, or even this magenta will work. I'm going to go with the magenta because it's so much darker, and I'm really trying to get my color nice and dark. So let's grab another palette knife here. And let's get some of this magenta in there. Hold off with that and pull this in. See what we get. Yeah, I should have stuck with my first indication. Wow, that's going like gray, just this like complete sort of gray. And I don't care for that. That looks so gray. I don't want it looking that gray. Okay. So what do I do now? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I don't do, which so many times we have the temptation to just start again, start over from scratch. I don't want to start from scratch. But what's the matter with it? Where, how should it be? Well, it needs to be cooler for one thing, because it needs to be more of a shadow area. So I need that blue in there. I need some cool blue. And what I'm going to do is not use so much. I think what I'm in fact going to do is I'm going to take this and add it to my blue here instead, just a little bit at a time. There we go. That's looking more like what I want, I think. Yeah, I just needed more blue. Now it's still really hard to tell what that is until I get it on here. But it's just going to be my darkest, or my background color. It's not going to be the highlights. It's not going to be the bright greens. So I think it's going to be okay on here. Let's try that color out. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So now I've got this nice deep color that's compared to the original. This, okay. Yeah, these deep colors. I don't know if you can see it on silly camera. The camera is just not doing justice to see how different it is than my purple. It almost looks exactly the same. So time-wise, I think this is about all we're going to be able to do to finish up today, okay, is get these established. So let's not lose the shapes. Look at these wonderful loose jagged shapes. Now it doesn't matter if we lose it a little bit, because when I paint my sky or this cloud and the snow and everything else, I can get it back again, okay, by painting the negative space around those trees. So I don't need to worry too much, but why ruin something that's good? So I don't want to lose my triangle sort of shape. That's for sure. Definitely don't want to lose that. So make sure when you come down each side of the tree, the two sides of the tree are not parallel to each other. And whoop, that was a bit of a big blob. So, things like that are going to happen. But that's okay, because we will shape that again when I paint behind them. But let's get it somewhat. I'd rather put down a shape that's too big, and then right now, and then I can thin that shape down later on. Okay, so don't be afraid to put thick paint down. but also if you need to thin it down because it's just not doing what you need it to do, it's not flowing. If you need that paint to flow better, don't be afraid to thin it down a bit. You know, you don't want to do it too much. So really try to, try to get, somewhat organic. Triangular, but, they are trees after all. They're not, again, they're not towers, or they're not like church steeples. So it's nice to get that shape feeling fairly rough and jagged. So that's why you need the brush you choose is important. And notice again, if you look at them, all the trees are joining together into one solid shape, okay? So make, so you can go ahead and really try and establish that. When it comes to the bottom here. So then it becomes one solid shape here. Okay. Now I can start to define the shape of this rock as well. By painting around that, and you'll see how that rock already really starts to pop out now already, okay? And look at all that red showing through, which I don't mind. Little speckles of red is nice, adds vibrance to the piece. And I don't have to worry about the pale. Like I don't have to worry about getting rid of it. Whereas if it was on a white canvas, that's what I'd be kind of trying to do. So if anything, I'm going to make my tree shapes a little too thick, wide here. And then I will get them a little more finalized when I paint the snow around it. Okay, but I think you can see things starting to slowly appear. Okay. So there's just simply our globby shapes. And again, if we were looking, from a distance, hey, they're starting to look like trees. Look at that. When we go close, they're just globs. Okay. It's just blobs of brush strokes. Okay. Like, look at that. Okay. Like, remember that. It's just, but where I put those strokes was important. Okay. Because overall, they are, sloping into these tree sort of shapes, or triangle. Okay. All right, let's take a look at this before I end. Is there anywhere else I can use this color? Now it's right here. It's simply fairly unified. I don't think I want to bring that in over here anywhere. I don't want to, I don't think it's totally necessary, but since I've got a whole bunch of it on my palette and it's just going to dry, I think I'm just going to go ahead and see all this dark here in that grass. I think you can see it. Let's paint that in now. So and it shows up all through here, there's dark paint underneath of that. So we're going to get some of this dark paint, but I don't want to, I don't want to lose my trees. So I got to change it a little bit so I can simply know what's trees and what's grass. So I think I'm going to bring back some yellow again. Maybe now I can use this one. How does this look different? Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to need some yellow. Oop, I don't need this magenta. That worked out well. I'm glad. Just that little bit of magenta, dulled it down, and then I needed the blue back because it got too dull and too gray. So mixing paint, it's experimental, but you do learn over time what works and what doesn't work, and you just simply learn what do I need. Okay, and I'm not going to make the mistake of putting in too much yellow this time like I did last time, right? I'm just going to pull a little bit. Yeah, see, look how quick that changes. Okay, you can always, I did what I always tell my students never to do, which is, you know, add too quickly. But I don't want to run out of paint here. Okay, now always check it because it's going to look different around this red once I get it down here. Okay, that's nice and dark, and it's definitely different than the tree green, so I think I can go with this. Paint always dries a different color than it was when you put it down. That's another thing to keep in mind. So it's going to change a little bit. Okay, so it's just different enough to my trees, so I'm not going to lose the shapes of my trees. Okay, I'll be able to remember and know what is what. And now I'm going to fill in, all of these, the green shapes. Let's get those in. Okay, again, I'm painting darker than it's going to be. Now here's where my shapes are a little bit different, but that's okay. I simply want to make sure I establish what is green and what is brown in that brownish orangish color, which is also really helpful to do that now to separate those shapes. Okay. Define the shape of that rock a little bit as well. If I lose some of the shape, I can always get it back a little bit later. But this definitely does help me figure out what is what here. And I like that. So it just helps reduce all those things that can mess me up and get me baffled. Got all this paint coming up on the brush. So you'll see I'm using these little up and down strokes. He's got going on there. And again, letting purposefully just little hints of that red show through. I really want to make sure I don't lose my slopey shape. I might have to bring some brown back into that because I'm afraid I'm losing some of this slope. These ones here really help establish the slope of this hill. This shape didn't do that. So I later on, when I paint these orangey brown colors, I know his doesn't do that. It is flattening out here. So I suppose we do want to do that because it is flattening out into our sandy bottom there. Okay, I just noticed some green here. So let's go ahead and get that in there. Don't let too much of the red show through. You don't want that. You don't want it to distract. Okay, so don't, it'll just happen naturally. Don't purposely avoid an area to have a bunch of the red show through. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm feeling okay about this, I think, so far. Why not? Since I have this light green, let's go ahead and get a little bit of some of these greens in here. I know we're running out of time. We're like well over our 2-hour mark. But just because I have this paint and I can establish. So I'm going to keep it fairly green and just a little bit. I'm going to stick mostly on the right-hand side of each tree. Hardly any difference here. But right away, getting a few layers and colors. Okay, just a little bit. It just right away will establish that they won't feel quite so flat anymore. Okay. So very subtle. I don't even know if the camera will show it. Yep, you can see it. It's there. But it's very subtle. Subtlety is just as important as bold contrast. Okay, you need to have subtle areas as well. All right, but I think this is a good place to stop for now. All right. And we will continue later on putting in our lighter areas. We're going to put in our snow, our sky, our the snowy area over here, in our brownish. I'm not sure if that's, I think it's dirt. It doesn't, see, that's the beauty. It doesn't really matter. We don't even need to know, is that dirt or is that just an orangey type of grass? It doesn't, you don't need that in order to get the feeling and get the enjoyment from the piece. Just simply doesn't need to be there, because all this is just a bunch of shapes of dark and light colors, warm and cool colors on a canvas, and it brings joy and it affects our memory, whatever it is. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do. All right. Okay, so let's leave it at that and continue later with the next video.